6.2, actually, there's two pieces to this section. There's a land use code update process as well as an ordinance regarding existing items that are referred to the planning commission. Now I'm confusing myself as
If you want, I can offer context on the discussion that got us to this process change.
Yeah, go ahead. I think I was.
Okay, so these comments are directed to the three council members who were not at the land use committee meeting, and when I get it wrong, just So we had this great land use committee meeting, and mayor was there as well. During the discussion, two things of interest. One of them is there's an item that the council referred to the planning commission in January of 2023 related to substantial remodel. So we sent that off, and there were basically two pieces of code change to the substantial remodel code. One was essentially what's the threshold, and the other was I think the language, if you bring up the January 2023 packet, the language was a change that codifies a practice that is already implemented by staff relating to, hey, when you do a substantial remodel, don't bother bringing your stormwater equipment up to date. So those are the two things. And during discussion at the land use committee meeting, it emerged that this item is no longer a great topic of discussion for the planning commission for two reasons. One is the larger policy concerns around changing the threshold for substantial remodel. There was a desire to do it for a certain reason. We can get into that, and it seems that reason may have disappeared. And the other is that with some additional digging, turns out that there really isn't a stormwater exemption for substantial remodel. If you look elsewhere in the administrative code of the city, it actually says, oh, when you're doing substantial remodel, here's actually how you determine what you should do for stormwater. So we sent it to the planning commission with two changes, both of which seem to have collapsed in terms of policy need, intent, accuracy. And that led to, from my point of view, that led to a discussion of, hey, what's the actual process, and does it make sense to pull things back, which is what this agenda bill discusses. Is that fair?
Yeah, I'm caught up to where we really should have been from the first place. Before I said I'm not. I was confused too.
I'm trying to provide context for council 1, 2, and
yeah. So there's really, I'll let you jump in, and if there's anything you want to add to this, and then I'll make something to this, add something to this.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Yeah, I think it's really two things. And so substantial remodel is a good example of something that enough time has elapsed and enough things have changed that potentially it makes sense to pull it back. The other, I think, sort of grouping of items is there have been a couple of items referred from the council to the planning commission in the last year that have been sort of discussed briefly at council, but haven't been, there has not been code developed, proposed draft code developed, and it has not really been vetted by staff. And if planning commission were to take those items up at this point, staff would really be starting at close to zero, going off of a couple of minutes of discussion and trying to put something together that we thought addressed the issues raised by council, but maybe didn't. So I think the recommendation is to pull items like that back and work on them more with land use committee, with council, and then refer them to planning commission so that planning commission has a full picture of what the policy guidance is.
And I might add that ultimately the goal is planning commission can do a more effective job if council is clear on what they're looking for when they want to send an item to the planning commission. It would save a lot of time, and it would allow them to work on behalf of what the issue that the reason council wants them to look at. And many of these items, either it's taken time and the issues have changed, or really weren't very well defined for them. So if we do that, that would allow planning commission to more effectively do the work we want, do their homework, send something back to council.
that right?
You agree, Councilmember Wilson?
Yes.
So that became both a process and a desire to pull items back so that council can make those decisions. And hopefully this is a process that can become more efficient for everybody. One of the key goals is staff would take the input from council, which would come via the land use committee first. And then they would be able to prepare code that would reflect that change. So you're not giving them options A, B, C, D. You're giving them, this is what council wants. This is the way it's been determined. Council's in agreement. Now you go do your work. And then they will come back with homework and decisions, but that'll reflect that direction that they got. And I think that's a much more efficient process. And will, I'm hopeful it can even save time all along. Whether it does or doesn't, I think you end up with better answers and more success as a team. So there's two pieces in two areas in here. One's a motion to recall certain items, and you've gone through those items and determined the ones that you would want to recall back to council.
Yes, the ones I would recommend are substantial remodel. There's lights, one on lights, there's one on communication facilities. One
Signs.
sign, that has not been referred.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was looking at the write-up you had in the resource where you had listed the others as well.
Oh, yeah, but that one hasn't been referred. We're still working.
Yeah,
on
it was just those three.
Just those three.
So. Oh, let me get a motion.
Okay.
So what we're looking for is a motion to recall Clyde Hill Municipal Code 17.060.030 on damaged, destroyed, demolished, or remodeled buildings and structures. This is the substantial. 17.08.160 lights and chapter 17.50 communications facilities from the planning commission review, refer back to the council land use committee for further development clarification. So do we have a motion?
So
Moved by Councilmember Miramoto, a second.
Second, but I have a question.
Yeah, let's get in. Seconded by Councilmember Wisner Slivka. So let's have discussion. I'll let you start.
Okay, so first question, when you talk about the diagram and being able to give the planning commission more clear feedback about what the council wants when they refer code, is there something that's sitting that we're not calling back or the planning commission doesn't have enough clarity? So they're not going to be as effective as they can. And I guess what I'm ultimately asking is, shouldn't we pull everything back to make sure that we've given the planning commission enough feedback so that they can effectively do their job?
Well, I would prefer to.
I could answer from the point of view of staff when we were reviewing the items that had currently been reviewed to the planning commission. So the expiration of variance is the other one where they've already met the one time and we're pretty close to, they just approved it at their last meeting. And then the other one was code enforcement, where that particular land use code change had been vetted by the city attorney. And there had been a lot of discussion already at the land use committee. So it had kind of already followed that process. Whereas the ones that we had identified before, either for a policy change or maybe hadn't gone through the whole process, those were the ones that we were recommending to pull back.
Okay. And then on the ones that we pulled back, anything that's sitting at council, that the diagram that we've got, and maybe I'm jumping ahead here, diagram that we've got just covers the case where things go to the planning commission. It doesn't cover the case if we decide that we're going to make changes in the council and not refer to the planning commission.
Yeah.
Premature. Okay.
I don't want to assume. Okay.
At the land use committee meeting, we were asked to kind of provide an update diagram for the land use code change process. And so this is an update to the 2022 memo. Obviously understanding that you might be taking any action that might change some things, but this is just for where we are now.
Okay. And I could say it's a pretty easy change. If we need to add an option to keep it with council, we can make that change.
Okay, and I have more questions on this, but I'll hold since we have a motion.
No, I mean, we're in discussion here. And Councilmember Sinwell? Any questions on this?
First of all, it seems to make sense to recall the items. I do have a threshold question about the intent. Is the intent going forward through this org chart is to, at the end of the day, will council come up with a sort of a binary option? Says, okay, we recommend X and only X, and then give that to the planning commission. And the reason I ask is that oftentimes, planning commission is there to debate alternatives, option X and option Y. In this new scenario that we're talking about, is our intent to provide the planning commission with a particular direction without option B and option C? Is that kind of where we're headed? I'm just need some clarity on that. Or not, maybe I'm just mistaken.
Well, council member, I think the goal is to provide the planning commission with enough information so they understand what council is looking to change and why, so they can do their work. Ideally, you would have mostly a single ordinance tied to it, and then planning commission gets that information and then expands or does their job and goes into the detail. My feeling is that by pulling these items back, council can determine items, can determine the direction they want taken. This should be primarily direction oriented, but planning commission likes to work with an ordinance, so you tie that direction into an ordinance, and then they would revise it and work on it. Is that accurate, Maya?
Yeah, I think that's accurate. And I would add, I think there may be situations where council is considering, one or more than one option, in which case, it could be totally appropriate to outline that and provide those options to planning commission. I think the point is that those options would have been seen by council, would have been discussed by council, and then given to the planning commission versus what's happening now sometimes, which is where staff ends up developing those options sort of offline after council has talked about it, and then planning commission looks at it, and then council ends up saying, we never saw what these options until it came back to us.
We didn't want that.
I think an example of that would be at the last planning meeting where, they got to an answer, but I think the city staff provided 8 different options. And it did get out. They were trying to do the planning commission a favor, but okay. So I understand the ideal, Mayor. I think that's an admirable goal, but I guess we all recognize there may be outcomes where the planning commission will be presented with a variety of options. And the intent is for them to sort that out with the public and then come back to us with a recommendation. That's all I got.
City attorney. Tom, you have?
Yeah, I just,
you had a comment?
I want to try to provide a little bit of clarity. I think admin is trying to get a better understanding of the exact concerns the council is wanting to address before it goes to the planning commission, so that the planning commission can have a better understanding of the issue that the council is concerned about. But the planning commission is a independent legislative body created by this council. And when they get an issue, they provide notice, they take public comment, and there may be iterations that the planning commission or the public ask the planning commission to consider. So it's an iterative process. There would be no point in having a planning commission if the council were to say, we want you to do this XYZ to this development regulation, then the council may as well just become the planning commission and eliminate it. So it goes through a series of layers. So I think the detail at the front from the council is good. It does not mean options won't be considered that haven't been considered by council at the planning commission level. And then that will come back to the council as a recommendation for final action. And the council at that point doesn't have to accept the planning commission's recommendation. But But the planning commission also doesn't exist to take direction, specific direction from admin or the council.
I get your point, and I agree. I hope everyone else does. Any other comment? So we have in this case, we have a motion on the table to recall the 3 items that were mentioned. So let's vote on that motion. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion passes unanimously. So, are there any other questions regarding the flow chart or any of that, or anything else to add?
I think you had more on the flow chart.
How often do Title 17 changes result in external review? So item 8 on the chart. So item 8, staff forwards results for external review. How often do Title 17 changes result in that?
Yeah, I haven't information of, and apologies. Just in case you're gonna talk amongst yourselves. Let me get back to you on that. In a nutshell, though, small modifications to land use codes in the municipal code don't rise to that level of external. Apart from the notification to state commerce of your land use regulation updates. It's not a matter of their review and comment, but rather your notification to them, your intent to adopt. And so the best thing to do is, instead of trying to kind of over explain everything to you, I can provide you information on that.
Because I just looked at that as like an over explanation. I'm trying to figure out how to make this process not look quite so daunting.
Actually, I hear you. I like that. It really lays things out nicely. But as far as, what falls in that external column, I definitely want to provide you the correct information.
Okay. Yeah, okay, and then the other question I had is we've gone back and forth about stormwater, and is stormwater part of substantial remodel, is stormwater exempt? So we've treated it as exempt, it's not exempt, so when did we figure that out? And are there any unknown implications of having people done remodels where they should have done stormwater work that didn't happen?
You're asking, have there been some that have been missed? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, are there people that did remodels where they should have done stormwater updates, where we didn't have them do stormwater updates? And I'm concerned that there are people out there that didn't do stormwater updates. No, you're shaking your head. So do we have people that didn't do stormwater updates?
We
Even though
followed the guidelines that were adopted after the last SEPA permit, Department of Ecology, NPDES permit back in 2015 or 16. And so then the guidelines and the rules that we've established for when the amount of impervious surface has to have been increased. No, we've been following those guidelines.
Yeah, there's in the Clyde Hill building permit guide, there's a kind of 3 categories that say when stormwater is required. And I wish Rich was here to answer this question, but he had said like they've been following, all of this has been applied consistently.
okay,
Yeah.
I found the
okay.
I found the answer to the question of what goes to external review. I can read it quickly. So any amendment to development regulations requires state agency notice. Development regulations are defined in the RCW statute as development regulations, or regulation means the controls placed on development or land use activities by a county or city, including but not limited to zoning ordinances, critical areas ordinances, shoreline master programs, official controls, planned unit development ordinances, subdivision ordinances, and binding site plan ordinances, together with any amendments thereto. A development regulation does not include a decision to approve a project permit application,
as defined in RCW 3670B020, even though the decision may be expressed in resolution or ordinance of the legislative body of the county or city.
That was something in there.
You have something? Yeah, I didn't, I had a couple questions on this one. So we actually, it's a status question. I went back to look at the January 23 thing, and there was an item in there that says there were 5 chapters that were already approved by the Planning Commission and Council. These chapters will undergo SEPA determination review by Department of Commerce once the other chapters are also ready. We haven't done any other chapters that are also ready. Like, are those changes just kind of sitting, waiting, or did we send them on? Is there a reason to hold on to them? Is there a reason to send them?
Are you referring to the comprehensive plan chapter
Nope.
elements?
Nope. I'm referring to the development regulations that we're voting that the Planning Commission and Council had approved by January of 20. If you bring up the January 2023.
Okay, I was not familiar with that, so.
I'm not 100% sure, but I believe they're in parking lot of sorts.
Is there any reason not to send them on?
We can do it once a year, right?
No, you can do them as they're approved. It's the docketing of the annual amendment that's once a year. But any development regulations that you pass, typically you package them and you send them off, because Commerce gets a little crazy when they get bits and pieces sent to them. But you know, you can do them as work. Now, some of those, I'm now trying to recall, I wasn't directly involved, but some of those are so minor, I don't think they rise the level of what I've just mentioned, and that's the RCW. So
Just going by the notes, this
Yeah,
is
yeah.
Anderson.
right. So I think the best thing, Dean, would be to council member, would be for us to take a look again at that list and see if it rose to this threshold. And if it is, get it going. If it isn't, then, you know, inform you folks.
Good way in. So my intention was, you know, we had this body of small code changes that were made, I believe, in 2022. And then we had some additional code changes referred to Planning Commission in early 2023 by council. So my intention has been to work through those. I think if we can, we'll do expiration of variance soon, hopefully. And then code enforcement, I believe, we'll probably have done in the next couple of months, given how the conversation is going. So at that point, I think we'll have been caught up with everything. At that point, I think we can send along anything that we have that's been in the parking lot.
For the reminder, there was a conversation, part of the bookend of the conversation that kicked off this item 6.2. We talked about the Planning Commission work plan, and there was a candid discussion around how the work plan isn't really under control of the Planning Commission, because it kind of depends on which work the staff gets done when. And so I offer that in terms of the work coming out of calling these items is now there's work on land use committee and staff to go and actually create a document for the Planning Commission that says, here's this matter for your consideration. We're looking for a recommendation. And my understanding from walking out of the meeting is that the process is we get that document, staff works on that document, it comes to council. And
Staff and land use.
Staff and land use, yep. And then that document, council refers to the Planning Commission the exact, like there's no longer any ambiguity or any, oh, but we meant this and this is what went over there. There's the document that goes to the Planning Commission, is what the council votes on as part of the referral.
That's what I understand. I
Right.
agree.
And I'm saying that
Is
out
that
loud to
clear?
minimize
Is there a
surprise.
clarification, Mike?
Well, I think the proposed code that goes to the planning commission is, I think staff will still put together a memo for planning commission and possibly some summary information for what we talked about in land use committee.
We're still agreeing.
Okay.
It's that document for the Planning Commission, instead of the council voting, and then there's a document that goes to the Planning Commission. The council votes, the council vote to refer has a draft of that document that says, yep, this is the document that's going there. We're good with it, or I don't like this, or I'm concerned about the ambiguity of that. That was my understanding from how you described it.
I'm just clarifying the document is proposed code, not necessarily the staff memo.
I think they're saying both.
I think you said both, and I think we're saying both.
Is that a problem?
I could see that becoming an issue potentially depending on timing. If something is referred and there's a time gap between when it is referred and when it's taken up. There could be updates or changes or other issues that come into play.
Well, that's exactly what we're dealing with. We just recalled. Timing. For timing was, timing is past and the issues aren't clear or have changed. And so it goes back and you fix that. I think that's the same issue. The point is council is comfortable with what they want to send to the planning commission. They agree on the detail. The subcommittee clearly did. So I think I agree with that issue. I don't, we can discuss
Step 5 here, right? Carter.
well, yeah,
But more, because that says revised code and sorry.
yeah. I agree with what we're doing. That was discussed. What we should do is, we'll talk about it offline. We have to get back to clarify something that's too bad. I don't think we make this. And do better. Talk about it.
And then the only other thing I have here is we discussed land use committee meeting every other month. And it seems like there's a bunch of work that just landed. So I don't know if every other month makes sense or if there's some other way to.
That's a committee.
We also said as needed. So we can certainly do a special land use meeting for sure.
Okay, great.
I think the
Question on step 8. How many times does Commerce come back and say,
No,
and second question is, what happens if they say no? Is that within their purview and rights to say no? Or is it just to check the
I don't
box?
think they actually say no. I think they say, wow, if you were to do this, growth management board might be calling you some
Got it.
complaints.
So it's an advisory. It's advisory when it goes to. Okay, thank you.
Yes, the council member has it exactly right, especially when it comes to the comprehensive plan. That's exactly their role. When it comes to individual development regulatory measures, unless they see something that's a red flag, they receive it and you won't receive comments back. But it's at the growth management hearings board that you really run the risk of making sure that you got everything absolutely airtight.
Thank you.
Okay, section 6.3. The draft ordinance regarding the referral of development regulation amendments to the planning commission. This is an ordinance that we've had some discussion on, I think. I'd like to bring to some level of motion or decide whether we're going to bring a motion and pass this, the purpose of which is that for certain items as council decides, should they decide they could handle certain planning development or issues development issues that would normally, that might have gone to the planning commission, they can handle it themselves. And there's an ordinance that defines some of those items and the level of those items. So I'm looking to see if we want to
Ask a question about how the process works on the motion.
put process.
The way this process works now, before this ordinance comes into, before considering this ordinance. Because, and I'm asking this question based on the discussion we had. I think you were out of town and there was discussion. And what I'm not clear on right now is the way things work today, how many public hearings are there for a change to a development regulation? I think that there's one in front of the planning commission when they're discussing it. Is that the only one? Is there an additional one when the council takes the planning commission's recommendation, or is it only one? I don't know, so I'm asking.
That should just be one. That was the point of the planning commission.
Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but I've always operated, the council always has a public hearing on any action it takes regarding code updates and such. And then then you do have planning commission actions.
Okay. So I just wanted clarity because this
I
is
think-
one of the,
Though I believe what the law requires is at least one public hearing. So that could be held in front of the planning commission or the city council. Since you've created a planning commission, most appropriate would be in front of the planning commission. You can have more than one, and often you do, depending on the input you get from the public. But I believe you're only required to have one, at least one.
thank you. Sorry, I just wanted that clarity.
All right, so I'm looking for a motion to approve this ordinance regarding the referral of development regulations to the planning commission. Do I have a motion? Okay. Moved by Councilmember Miramoto. Second.
Hear me, I don't know.
Do I have a second? Second by Councilmember Wisner Slipshot. Any discussion? Anything, Councilmember Olson?
Well,
Sorry, I didn't ask.
yeah,
I didn't go around the table.
sure. So, all right, so I guess I'm maybe lost track here. And so to summarize this, we're talking about, this is the one that keeps coming up, right? For the last three, this is the third council meeting. Is that this one I'm talking about? So no, I would not concur with this. I won't be voting for this because I do think that we do need more input from the public and not less. And just simply going through the planning commission, and even if nobody does, from the public, they have the option to, but even if they don't, chime in on it, that's 5 people from our community that otherwise wouldn't necessarily have the opportunity to chime in on something. So yeah, again, I'll still be voting no on this.
I'll go. Councilmember Slipka, do you have anything?
No further.
Anything? No. Councilmember Sinwell, do you have any comments?
I do. At the last meeting that we spoke about this, might have been early June. We went around the horn and I think most of us agreed that we wanted more throughput. And one of the concerns we had was, we called it checks and balances. And we talked about stuff like supermajority. We talked about making sure there are at least 2 bites at the apple for the public to hear these things. And so I was a little surprised and frankly disappointed when I saw this ordinance, because it seemed not to recognize that discussion on June 11th. And that's at least what I was, when I walked away from that discussion, I thought there was at least that view for most of the council members. But anyway, so as it's written, without those checks and balances, and to make sure that the public gets those multiple bites at the apple, I couldn't support it as written.
We did, I think it was a majority of the council before, but now I believe it's all council, isn't it? So there was the wording change to be. Which was my concern last time, so if I read the language, it was an increase in the number of council.
So that's a great question. I'm looking through it right now. I think if you look at page 4 or so it's 1901-005, section B. It says, upon a majority vote of the full city council, the council may elect to address an issue on its own. So it is still a majority vote.
Of full council,
Of the full council.
full council.
Oh,
So the way I read that was full council means 5 and a majority vote of 3 out of 5.
yeah.
So my concern before was that if we had 2 council missing, 3 would be a quorum and could in fact pass by a majority of 3. Right, that was my concern before, but now we have a full council, and if full council 3 votes, then
Yeah.
that is the majority of full council. And that, but correct me
Okay.
legally if I'm wrong.
Um, So I'm glad you offered that because I thought a bunch about, I went back and watched some of the meeting and looked at the conversation. And so I agree with you about how this works as written, as revised here. The other is that anything that happens here, the mayor has the right to veto.
I agree.
in our
I
city.
agree. Yep,
And so we have multiple checks
we do.
on safety here.
We do.
Okay. I don't know what the term is for voting one at a time as compared to.
Roll call.
Roll call vote.
Thank you. I think it's called a roll call. Yes. So we will do that. We will do a roll call vote. We'll start with council member 1.
Aye.
Okay, council member 2,
No.
council member 3, council member 4.
No.
Council member 5.
I really want to say pass.
Aye.
Okay. So the motion passes 3 votes to 2. And thank you for your,
And you can, by the way.
and I can be